of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tristero. Chapter 11. Nothing special? Making lunch for the boys and their heroic guests had seen them enjoy some story sharing, laughter, and quite frankly, terrible jokes all linked into the pro-hero community. If they honestly expected him to believe that they'd successfully prank Cementos into actually shedding a brick, then they were delirious. Then the food eaten and 1400 on the horizon, the heroes left. They'd assured him that they'd take Denki home, and not too long after, a more refreshed-looking Shinso Kimiko, he'd been able to rest peacefully all morning knowing that her son was in safe hands, had come by for Hitoshi. They'd both walked back to the apartment smiling, a paw-print decorated cake box proudly and carefully held in the child's hands. Watching them go, the cafe owner felt himself smile before returning to his prep work. And doing a final spot check around the cleaned eating area. Well, what prep work could be done the day before anyway. He had excellent chillers and freezers, sure, but as one of his former employers used to say, fresh is best. Once done, he'd return to his apartment, fired up the desktop computer, and completed some essential admin before deciding to check on www Norenaku Musutavu GP. Looking over the rudimentary website he'd crafted to boost interest in his establishment and the self-defense classes, it was a free web domain. He didn't need anything too flashy, thanks to word of mouth. And blinking bewilderedly, he could hardly believe that there were several 5-star reviews. He'd felt, as he read each one, a little overwhelmed. It's still too early to get your hopes up, Aizawa, he cautioned himself, for if his business classes had taught him anything, it was that some enterprises could be what one of his teachers had called flashes in the pan. Sure, people liked his food, and he had 6 adults, including Inko, coming for the adult class at 1700, but if a Starbucks opened down the road or nearby gyms clocked onto his efforts and offered discounted prices with actual facilities, he'd had to stress that he couldn't offer showers and he didn't have a smoothie bar like many fitness centers did, then, well, people were fickle. You couldn't count on a solid customer base these days, and hell, it wasn't like he was providing something that people couldn't get elsewhere. Trying to make a community in a world where most people didn't know what that meant anymore. Surely could it be this easy? Could it? It was too soon to tell. He shouldn't allow current public opinion to bolster his confidence when it came to the wider goal he'd set himself. Either he wouldn't. Oi, what's with the face? Blinking out of his thoughts, the cafe owner leaned back in his rickety old computer chair that had seen him through so many hours of studying and regarded his bored employee lodger as the teen approached him from the bathroom, now freshly showered and wearing some of his new clothes. He looked so much more relaxed now, didn't he? At least that was something he could hold on to.
What face?
He asked with a shrug.
I wasn't doing something as illogical as smiling, was I?
You look, I don't know, worried? Tabby huffed while stepping over to join him. What, you don't like Bubble Girl 303 writing that she'd ask for Aizawa-san's cheesecake for a last meal because it's to die for? He laughed, snorted. Or that Many Many Legs says, I could eat Aizawa's onigiri until they came out of my eyes? He chuffed, his eyes rolling. Man, how do people come up with such things? He muttered while scrolling down, a gasp leaving him. Almight's added a review? He balked. Shit, he's even added a photo. He breathed. God, how many muffins did you make for the guy? He asked, his irises taking in the whole image of the pro as he lazed next to a swimming pool in nothing but board shorts, his drinks table crowded with cake and a little black cat plushie.
2 baker's dozen worth,
he said offhandedly, his brows lifting as he too stared at the rambunctious blood biting into the almost completely demolished confection. He held in powerful fingers whilst he lounged on a sunbed that was similarly dotted with baked goods. Was he winking and smiling suggestively? He had a big mouth and a lot of teeth, didn't he? We're going to be swamped tomorrow. The flame quirk user sighed dramatically, those turquoise eyes narrowing on him once more.
There's that look again,
he stated.
I just find such praise irrational,
he replied mildly.
It's only food.
Only food! The younger muttered incredulously. Does not... Dobby. He chuckled.
We've had a great opening week. I accept and acknowledge that.
He grinned when he realized that the other was brewing up a speech of some kind.
However, being a realist, I need to factor in that popularity is usually a passing phase, and that good sales aren't always guaranteed.
He mused before with a little sigh he regarded All Might's ridiculous balls.
Plus, this isn't the kind of attention that I want to encourage,
he explained.
I didn't open my cafe for people like him, as good as he apparently is, and I don't want any of his fanatics pushing at the people I want to help, either.
Watching as the teen settled, a quiet laugh leaving him, the younger then moved to place a hand on his shoulder. Wow, this was a big step. It was the first physical contact they'd shared. I don't know who you are or where you came from, not so old guy, he breathed, but you're too good for a world like this, he allowed before quickly withdrawing and making his way to the couch. Do me a favor and don't stare at that screen too hard, all right? He called while flapping into it, his hand reaching for the remote and flicking the TV into life. The last thing I need is you realizing how actually amazing you are. Having left his ward to sleep, he placed a thin comforter over him since the aircon had cooled the room a little too effectively. Not that he should be complaining. The brand new units he'd bought were pricey, so they should work well. Then, after leaving him a note, Shouta had slipped into another variation of his training gear, black sweatpants and a cat-sleeved maroon t-shirt with a white chibi-style cat curled over his heart because branding, and headed downstairs. It was 16:50, and already the two salarymen who'd asked for instruction were standing outside in gym wear whilst looking at the marquee he'd set up 15 minutes ago. Midoriya Ingo, bless her heart, was also making her way up across the apartment complex's courtyard in a cute pink jogging set, a Hello Kitty sweatband haloing her ponytailed hair, with Izuku diligently marching beside her in his own All Might shorts and matching t-shirt. How could the bastard who'd sired such a wonderful boy and married such a sensational woman just abandon them? If he ever met Midoriya Hizashi, they were going to have a little more than words. Aizawa-san, good evening, and thanks so much for this. Returning the short bow the two men offered him, he shouldn't have been too surprised to see Midnight, Loudcloud, and Present Mike making their way to join them. Really? Really? Shouta, you're looking decidedly yummy in that color, the R-rated hero called out excitedly, her pink tongue snapping at the lips. Her costume was a little more reasonable, with the addition of a white form-fitting undersuit that did nothing to disguise her assets. He knew that an adult class was going to be a mistake.
What are you doing here?
He asked whilst Izuku, who was now attached to his leg like the irrationally adorable koala he was, gazed up at them with starry eyes. What were here for your expedition, Sensei? Loudcloud replied, his tone sheepish, his hands clapped together like he was praying, whilst his blonde associate nodded vigorously at his side. This morning's demonstration was a bit of an eye-opener, you know.
I see,
he stated, his hand absent-mindedly ruffling the forest locks beneath his fingers.
Well, if you're here to learn, then get in the marquee.
He shrugged.
No chit-chat, no witty insights, and no leering,
he added, his right hand's index finger pointing at each in turn.
Now then, we'll begin every class in the same way, so I want you all to try your best to memorize these stretches and their sequence,
he stated before gesturing Izuku to stay at his side.
Midoriya-kun can assist you if you're struggling.
When 1800 came and went, getting squashed in the Agatani Inko and the heroes hadn't been on his agenda. I feel so freaking pumped! The voice quirk user admitted loudly. Man, oh man, I can hardly wait to use that little number of the next manga who tries to get the jump on me. Oh, yeah! It's pretty empowering, man. Midnight had similarly cooed, her hands trying to get the feel of him before he easily slipped away. Well, Shouta, you're so mean, she pouted as he distanced himself with a huff. Were pros allowed to be so handsy? Honestly, I just can't believe how much sense it all makes, Loudcloud admitted. I've never had a trainer who's been so straightforward and helpful before, he added, his smile genuine. Are we all right to keep coming by?
You're a paying customer just like anyone else, he shrugged. But if more of the locals start coming by, I might have to put on other sessions to accommodate you.
he mused thoughtfully.
Which is doable so long as your patrol rotations marry up with the times I can offer,
He added mildly. Ah, yappa! The female hero clapped giddily. Well then, speaking of patrols, we better roll out, she said before blowing him a kiss. See you later, Shouta. Feeling his eyes twitch a little, logical, the cafe owner simply bowed before offering similar goodbyes to the salarymen, a little out of puff, but elated, and the Midoriya pair, his eyes locking with the tearful woman, his concern flaring.
Eiko-san, are you?
She tried whilst shaking her head and wiping her eyes, while Suzuku played around on a nimbus that the taller of the pros had ferried him around on, his little arms waving goodbye to them excitedly as he was brought back to the ground. I haven't seen him so happy in such a long time, she murmured. And you asking him to assist you was...
He's a wonderful young man,
he gently interrupted.
And very talented besides.
He furthered.
He's a credit to you.
Oh, she wobbly smiled. Thank you, Shouta-san, she bowed. I thank my lucky stars every day that you've come into our lives, truly, she added before a true smile stealing her features. Ah, but it's getting late and we all have early starts tomorrow, don't we? She tried to chuckle. Izu-chan, come say goodbye to Aizawa-san and then let's have dinner, all right? All right, Mama, the freckled black called, his arms octopusing around his leg once more. Good night, sir, he beamed. And thank you. Yagi Torchinori wasn't a man who tended to be surprised by anything these days. At the age of 15, he'd been approached by a woman who he'd come to love and think of as a mother. With a beaming smile and unimaginable power, who'd taken his corkless form and developed him into what many people called the symbol of peace. He'd battled evils both ancient and modern. He'd saved countless lives and made many more enemies besides. He'd achieved a status and wealth that had surpassed his wildest dreams, which had meant that he was further able to help thousands of people, not just through heroism, but acts of charity, fundraising, and goodwill. All in all, though at times the path he'd walked had been difficult, he'd made his mark. He maintained his smile, and as he gazed at the lowering crime figures, watched society become more stable and prosperous on a whole, he was sure that his beloved homeland was all the better for it. However, with his efforts came media attention, fame, and what Mirai often referred to as sneaky low-life opportunities. His dear friend and former sidekick, he ran his own agency now, but they still worked together often, had insisted, when he'd heard about his muffin order, is your personal chef in need of replacing, that he be the one to collect it. The green-haired man's golden eyes had narrowed at him for doing such a brash and illogical thing, because hadn't he learned by now? The cafe owner had probably seen him as a cash cow. He'd probably told everyone he knew that All Might would be coming to his eatery at 8 o'clock. He surely would have contacted the local media as well, because who wouldn't drum up as much attention to their newly opened establishment by having the #1 bro photographed picking up an order of food? However, to their shared astonishment, when Mirai had pulled up and parked in the road a few feet away from the Noraneko, aside from a few locals milling around, no one was there. The cafe, for all intents and purposes, appeared to be closed. Yet, as he cautiously approached, he'd admitted it was just as charming as my two protégés told me it would be, which was high praise from his usually stoic partner. Place and seen the owner diligently packing up the order into paw-printed cake boxes. There'd been no fanfare, no demand for photographs for promotional purposes, and Aizawa-san had been just as amenable as he described. He tried to refuse what I felt the products and his additional time was worth. He genuinely didn't seem to care about who I was, and gave me a lemonade for the road. It was very refreshing, if a little gruff. After listening to his friend's report, the pair of them had enjoyed one of the confections together, and then he'd contemplated the mysterious young man he'd met. But the muffins were just as glorious as he called. The depth of flavor, the moist texture, the balance of sweetness. The same mysterious young man who had thought nothing of almost being sexually assaulted by what the police had told him were a gang of wannabe yakuza who we've been trying to connect to a string of robberies, public disturbances, and threatening behavior, but the locals tend to stay quiet for fear of reprisals, so we've been unable to arrest them until now. The same mysterious young man who'd officiously and efficiently subdued the low-level fiends, and had the wherewithal to approach the matter considerately and within the law, and supplied them with ample evidence that would be admissible in court, and who'd not been impressed in the slightest when he'd appeared. How rare, how strange, how incredibly delightful! He'd almost forgotten really what it felt like to be treated as an ordinary person, and it felt, regardless of the other's brashness, remarkably good. Yes, he had a sneaking suspicion that he might be shifting his patrol route a little further to the east, a little closer to the area where so much low-level criminality seemed to be thriving, and where it just so happened a certain cafe was offering such enticing things to tempt him with.